Hey team, you're about to experience my interview with Thomas GLEESON. Thomas is the co-founder of StoreHero. StoreHero is a e-commerce analytics platform that measures profitability and unit economics across all of your transactions. StoreHero unifies your e-commerce sales, marketing data, and costs to give you a real-time view of your profit at a store product or even an order level. We had a fantastic conversation about unit economics and how important it is that store owners truly understand whether they are actually profitable or not in their e-commerce operations. Enjoy. This is the E-commerce Edge podcast with your host, Jason Greenwood. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome Thomas GLEESON from StoreHero to the pod. Welcome, Thomas.
Thank you very much, Jason. Really looking forward to the chat.
Me too. And we're talking off air that you've been following me, or we've been connected on LinkedIn, I think, since about 2020. Lots has changed for you since then. It's always great to hear from a fan. I really appreciate the fact that you reached out to me and you just basically thanked me. And you've actually thanked me on a couple of occasions for the content that I put out, that you actually found it helpful, that you found it useful to you. And not everybody does that. Even people that love your content, but takes that little bit of extra effort to reach out and send a message and say thank you. First of all, I want to thank you for giving me the encouragement to keep going with content, because it is the feedback that I get from people who consume my content. It is that feedback that actually keeps me going, keeps me fired up, keeps me motivated to keep producing content. So first of all, thank you for that.
No problem at all. And yeah, it has been about 2020. Yeah, that's a long time ago now at this stage. I feel like I've been following you on LinkedIn for forever at this stage. I think when you log on to LinkedIn today, there's so many different posts, particularly in the e-commerce landscape, but that hasn't always been the case. And you've been one of the heavy hitters now for quite some time. So over the years, I've learned an awful lot from the posts that you put up there. And I suppose I started posting myself quite a bit in the last year, and I know the effort that goes into being original and posting valuable content on a semi-regular cadence. I know what it takes.
Love it so much. Now, we were talking also about off air. Now, before we get into StoreHero and how that came about and what it is, what it does, it is a technology platform. It's a SaaS tech platform for e-commerce merchants. But before we get into that, you were saying that your mom has run an e-commerce store for many years, and then your dad comes from an accountancy background. And this kind of positions you right smack in the middle of entrepreneurship and commercial reality. Pretty good grounding for you.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. Wildweed.ie, based here in Ireland. I'm sure most of your guests could probably hear I'm from Ireland, but for those who weren't sure, that's where I'm from. So I grew up in a house with e-commerce at home. My mother's had an e-commerce business, as I said, since 2004. So selling everything from personalized Christmas gifts, wedding gifts, baby gifts, all that kind of thing. Yeah, we had no choice really but to grow up with e-commerce. That being said, then my dad was an accountant. I suppose I saw firsthand the challenges of. My dad is obviously the accountant for our business. He doesn't have an e-commerce or a marketing background. And I suppose I saw the challenge with having an accountant who isn't overly familiar with D2C or e-commerce, advising an e-commerce business on how to run the business financially and the dangers that entails.
And I guess what that does is it grounds you both in the concept of, okay, I need to create something that the market actually wants and needs, and I need to be able to position that. I need to be able to market that. I need to be able to get the word out about this in a way that isn't going to break the bank and grows a community and grows a brand. But I also need to make sure that from an operational perspective and from a commercial perspective, we actually are profitable. And I guess it's those two things married together that maybe to a degree got lost over the last few years, particularly during COVID and when the TAM exploded for e-commerce. Profitability, or even the concept of profitability and operational excellence and efficiency, to a degree went out the window. And it was like, no, growth at all costs, regardless of whether we're profitable or not. And now with the era of free money coming to an end, this whole concept of actually, shit, we better be profitable, otherwise we're going to go out of business because we don't get free money anymore. That it sets you up. This background sets you up perfectly for working in the field of e-com.
Yeah, 100%. And everything you've just said there is 100% correct as well, in that, the TAM within COVID really exploded. And I suppose as a result of that, if you were set up for e-commerce at all, you were up and to the right. There was no questions asked. You didn't need to be as like a genius marketer. If you had your business set up correctly and you had a good product, as long as you were willing to spend, your business was going to grow. And because everybody was online, the ad spend was so effective that you were probably going to grow profitably as a result. But I'm sure as everybody listening to this podcast is fully aware, the cost of Facebook and Google advertising has definitely not got any more efficient since COVID. And obviously the cost of doing business through inflation and everything else since COVID has just meant that those e-com margins have been squeezed, and the businesses that are really trying to survive and thrive really need to have their numbers down to a fine art. I think over the years, a lot of businesses have probably got away with an element of gut feel, spending more, almost seeing Facebook and Google as this black box. We're going to increase spend. We're profitable. We know we're spending. We know we're doing sales. We don't really need to understand the mechanics of what's actually making this business profitable. But unless you have that fundamental understanding today, I think you're going to find it difficult to continue to grow your business profitably.
And I guess that's probably what led to StoreHero. But pre-StoreHero, after working, I guess, in your mom's business and helping to understand how that worked and how it was profitable and what levers you could pull in the business, then you went into the IT space. You were a CAM. Then I guess took this big leap in your career, smack dab in the heart of D2C e-commerce land at Shopify. You were there for 3.5 years. What was the rocket ship ride like over at Shopify?
Amazing. Honestly, it was fantastic. I loved every minute of it. I had a number of different e-commerce businesses over the years. So my first one I set up when I was 19, 2013 or 14. Not showing my age or anything like that, but my first business was selling personalized kids books. So I used to do the writing, and then my granddad was actually a painter, so he used to do all of the illustrations for them. So I ran that business for probably 5 years, but maybe 18 months before I wound it up in around 2021, maybe, I decided to move it over to this platform I saw on the up and coming called Shopify. I did a couple of courses online, got the business set up. I was really in the ecosystem. I was living and breathing Shopify. It wasn't a massive business or anything like that I was running. It was definitely a side hustle type project. I then saw a job come up to work in support directly at Shopify. And I just thought to myself, Jason, what better opportunity to learn how to use the platform than to go and work there in the support roles. So I joined, I think it was July 2019. So went through a really good onboarding process and was probably 9 months in the door when bang, COVID-19 happened and everything just took off from there. So it was an incredible role. I started off in support, then I moved into Shopify Plus support, and I spent the last 2 years there as a merchant success manager. So essentially guiding brands on their e-commerce and marketing strategy and general Shopify roadmap as well. So I was originally working with brands in the maybe 5 to 15 million bracket, and then later on in the 25 to 100 million bracket, largely based in the UK. But it was an incredible journey. I got in rooms and meetings and conversations that I didn't think I ever would, and really opened my eyes to, I suppose, that old saying, the more you don't know, in one sense, and that once you start talking to people who are really dialed in and all this kind of thing, you realize how maybe naive you were that you might have known it all a couple of years ago.
And that brings us right up to speed with StoreHero, which you founded in December of 2022. So not quite 1 year young yet. And StoreHero, you bill yourself as the number one profit platform for e-commerce stores. So basically, as I understand it, never used your platform before. However, as I understand it, effectively, you are an sales analytics platform and data visualization and dashboarding platform for e-commerce merchant, which kind of unifies e-commerce, your sales, marketing data, cost data, and really with the whole goal behind this, as I understand it, is to give you a complete visibility of the profitability of your store down to the product and order, and I assume even customer level as well. So do I understand the platform correctly?
You've nailed it. I don't know if I could give a better pitch myself, but yeah, essentially what we've built, Jason, is a profit platform for D2C brands to, as you said, centralize not just their Shopify, but also if they're on WooCommerce, Magento, or BigCommerce. And then we centralize all of the marketing stack. So your Search Console, Google Analytics, GA4, Google Ads, Facebook Ads, TikTok, your email marketing. That's fine. Now we have all of your e-commerce and your marketing data, but that's not the full picture. And this is the crucial part that I think has been lacking with a lot of platforms over the years. We've also enabled you to pop in all of your fulfillment, your 3PL costs, all of your shipping costs, transaction fees to get to the contribution level. And then if you want to, you can also input all of your fixed OpEx as well. So your staff costs, rent costs, software costs, agency fees, and so on and so forth. So we have a number of brands and agencies using the platform in two different mechanisms. Number one, to get to that contribution margin level figure. And number two, to get to an EBITDA or net profit figure as well. I suppose I was operating a StoreHero type platform myself on the most rudimentary form, known as the Excel spreadsheet, for probably 4 years prior to making the move to set up StoreHero with my co-founder Carl. Yeah, I was doing it on a Monday evening for my parents' business, really manually. There was nothing fancy about it, really pulling in all of the core information from the various platforms I've just mentioned to try and get a real sense of that profitability. As I mentioned there, my dad's an accountant, and particularly over COVID, we saw really good growth, and that manifested itself on Facebook in higher return on ad spend. And I saw this ROAS figure keep going up and to the right, and I just said to my dad, we need to up this ad spend because the ROAS is really strong. Now, accountants by their very nature are very often apprehensive to marketing metrics. So he turned around to me and said, what is ROAS? So it took me a while to really get him around to my way of thinking and what ROAS actually was and what it wasn't. As soon as I explained it to me, so you want me to give you more money to spend based on this revenue-orientated metric that isn't taking into account product costs, fulfillment, transaction fees, or any other costs? And I stood there, yes. He was just like,
no, that's not going to happen. You're going to have to give me a better pitch than that.
Yeah, I'm not allowed to spend a cent in our family business without justifying it to the nth degree. But what it forced me to do was actually understand, okay, like, what is the break-even point ROAS on a product level, fusing all these product costs in? What does it look like on a business level? And when we can actually demonstrate that component to them, we could actually see, okay, we're actually massively underspending on our ads. And for the first time, even though it was set on a spreadsheet, I had the data to back that up. And that was really powerful. It meant we could increase the ad spend. ROAS came down a little bit, but I could show him the contribution margin was actually much higher as a result of spending more. And therefore, I just had the confidence and clarity to really spend a hell of a lot more money. And that was obviously just better for the business as a result in the end.
And I mean, guess what, when we put this under an umbrella of what you cover, it's really what does the unit economics of your business look like? And I've always had an issue with ROAS because it, as you say, it doesn't really give you the true, genuine picture of how the business is performing based on a given amount of ad spend, right? So sure, it's telling you the revenue maybe that particular ad spend generated, but if you're not doing that profitably, then what's the point? Then you're actually subsidizing the marketing of the business and pulling that straight out of your potential profitability. So unless we understand, like, all of our COGS costs, unless we understand that, unless we understand our true operational costs within the business, how will we ever have an accurate picture of whether going ahead and spending both what we're currently spending or potentially spending more, how do we know whether that is going to be sustainable over the long term? Because ROAS doesn't give you a true picture of whether that ad spend is truly sustainable or not.
Yeah, really good points. It's still a really vital metric to check on and have as a checklist along your list of metrics that we need to check on a daily basis. But like you just alluded to there, it's definitely not the be all and end all metric that I think you could be led to believe by logging onto D2C Twitter or onto LinkedIn every day of the week, because there is people that tend to purport it as this godlike metric that everybody needs to follow and just follow this one only. If you're a business and you go to an agency and they tell you that they can get you at 3 ROAS without really delving into your setup at all, that's not really any of use to you. You could be a business that is a reseller and that only has 20-30% margins, and operating in a 3 ROAS is going to make your business quite difficult to run efficiently. Every business's ROAS is going to be, it really depends on the margins, the unit economics, your shipping structure, your 3PL structure, and what a good ROAS is really going to look like for you. One component we have built into the platform is actually on a product level being able to see what your break-even point ROAS is, factoring all those variable costs into account. Because I think there's a lot of businesses out there that are still overspending on ads, but I actually still think there's a lot more businesses that are actually underspending, and they're underspending because they don't have clarity on what their underlying unit economics actually look like, in that they could be generating enough contribution margin to just cover their OpEx, and they might think that the ROAS isn't strong enough, but the ROAS could actually be really strong. They're actually just not spending enough. So we're trying to get businesses along the lines of thinking on contribution margin instead of ROAS, really.
And when you think of pulling in these costs, do you effectively amortize, say, for example, a shipping cost? Do you amortize those across a number of SKUs? Do you base that on the value of the item versus the value of the total shipment and then allocate it that way? How do you allocate? Because obviously, if you're doing profitability, right, and retain margin down to the SKU level and potentially even the customer order level, you need to be pretty accurate on what it costs, like in terms of landed cost, in terms of operational cost. There are certain things that can be split equally, like perfectly equally across the whole catalog. I don't know, maybe it's a customer service cost and maybe we split that pretty equally across our catalog. But then there's other things. If you've got some volumetrically large item versus a very small, lightweight item, obviously we need to make sure that we're taking into account the right allocation of costs at the SKU level to be able to get a more accurate picture of which products are actually profitable for us, both in terms of inbound costs, but also the outbound costs will be different too. If we go to ship a large bulky item, the cost to outbound that to the customer and then potentially return logistics on that will be very different to a lightweight, something that could go in a parcel pouch. So these cost variables can be very complex for merchants to try to calculate, even if they want to. So how do you help merchants to better understand those variable costs that can be quite different by SKU?
By SKU, yes. Really what we're doing is there's two components to this, on the order level and on the SKU level. On the SKU level, what we're really saying is you're popping in what we're doing for the break-even point ROAS specifically. We're assuming a single product order. Obviously, it's going to vary. If you have ordered multiple items, your shipping costs will be diluted and so on and so forth. What we're basically saying is you can set your default shipping cost on a product level by country as well. So you can get down to the point where you can say, okay, my product cost is, I don't know, £100. This is my shipping cost to fulfill that, assuming a single product order to Ireland, the USA, to Spain, or wherever it is. And then we have all of your transactional fees already pulling into the platform. We have your 3PL fees. And as a result, if there is any, this is another component we have also factored in. I know Australia is the same, Ireland in most of the EU. So there's a VAT implication there as well that needs to be taken into account on a ROAS level, whereby if you spend €1 on a Facebook ad and you generate €5 on Shopify, Facebook will show you that as a 5 ROAS. But we have actually, that's obviously not a 5 ROAS because you've spent €1 ex VAT, but the €5 is fully inclusive of VAT. So we have that calculation taken into account on the product level as well. On the order level, it's completely accurate. So on the order level, your product price, the sale price comes in, the COGS pull in directly from your platform, your Shopify platform. Alternatively, you can actually hook it up with Zapier to hook into your inventory management system and pull in those real-time COGS. And then you can also zap in your real-time shipping costs if you have them on an order level to make sure that's completely right. And same with your 3PL. So on an order level, we're confident that it's 100% correct. And that's a really important piece, in my opinion, in that what you can do in StoreHero is really pop in. You don't want to see this every day, but popping in at the end of every week or every month and actually saying, okay, let's filter by or sort by the highest gross margin orders. And now let's do the opposite and let's filter by the lowest gross margin or often loss-making orders. And you learn a lot about your business from that, from site merchandising, discounting strategy. Is there products that we're pushing to our paid marketing that we really just don't have the margin to back up? A lot of businesses are learning an awful lot from this. Obviously, we want to replicate the high margin orders as much as possible, but businesses are often learning more about their business from looking at those really low margin or often loss-making orders. And how do we mitigate against those? Our plan to just reduce them as much as possible, because often a good business will be made of really good orders, but often a bad business will be killed on a flood of really unprofitable or low margin making orders flooding the system. And because e-commerce is really fragmented, I suppose is the word, it's difficult to pull that all together and actually ascertain where you're actually making or losing money on an order level.
And as you rightly point out, it is not in an agency's best interest. For example, if they own performance marketing for your business, it is not in their best interest to understand your margins. It's not, even if they try to take in average margins, because that's an easier thing to calculate on the performance that they're driving for you. And most agencies don't necessarily look at margins at all. It's just not in their best interest to do. It is their best interest to purely look at revenue. And then their argument, and I've heard this argument from many agencies, their argument is, well, we don't pull any of those other business levers. Like, we don't control your profitability. We don't control your shipping costs. We don't control all these other variables. We're not responsible for your business model and making sure that you're profitable. That's your job. Our job is to try to get you the highest performing ads for the lowest performing cost by optimizing ad performance. And to a degree, they are right. but it is certainly self-serving to intentionally ignore profitability, both collectively as well as down at a SKU level. It is absolutely in their best benefit to completely ignore that and to intentionally have no desire to understand your business model in any way, shape, or form. And so I think that merchants are, I don't want to say intentionally kept in the dark, but the reality is that the entire industry is shaped around how agencies can present the best value to you as a client without giving you too many additional insights that would cause their performance to look worse than it could be. And so I feel like this is just one of those other dark arts that merchants really, unless they are commercially, really both commercially savvy, but also commercially inclined, they will listen to an agency because it feels good. Because it feels good when an agency tells you, oh, your ads are killing it, your ads are crushing it, or the ads that we're doing for you are crushing it. Oh, great, cool. Okay, we're getting a 3 ROAS. That's supposedly an amazing metric. The agency's told us that's an amazing metric. Basically, I'm spending $1 and I'm getting $3 back. Wow, amazing. So it is a little bit of intentionally keeping the blindfold on by some merchants because it all feels a little bit too complex and it all feels a little bit too scary to try to understand the true economics of your business, especially if you don't come from an accounting background or you don't come from a financial background. You're not a CFO. You've maybe never been a CEO at a large company before, so therefore you've never needed to understand the economics of the business. But I tell you, particularly if you're a small to medium-sized D2C brand owner or B2C brand owner, you have to know this stuff, or at least you have to figure out a way to get to the core of this. And I guess that's what you're saying. You're saying, hey, our platform, the whole idea behind it is to democratize access to this data for people that may not necessarily be natively commercially savvy.
Yeah, 100%. And I suppose just one piece there, you're right in that I come across this every day with agencies, but I'm seeing more and more agencies that are really starting to delve in and report on contribution margin above ROAS, which is a big shift because that hasn't always been the case. We've launched recently a white label solution for agencies so they can actually white label the StoreHero software and report to their clients on contribution margin. The good agencies want to show this to their clients because it demonstrates the good work that they're doing. The bad agencies don't want their clients anywhere near this software because often it shows up the stuff that you've just alluded to that they've been trying to hide. Again, the idea of looking at contribution margin, if you can get your numbers piped in correctly and there's nowhere to hide. Your spend goes up, your profit after marketing goes down. We're not doing a good job on marketing. There's no way to say that, look at it in this attribution window, it looks good. Look at it in that attribution, it looks even better. Contribution margin cannot lie to you. You've spent X, you've generated Y after marketing. That's good, that's bad. Does it feed into our longer term strategy in terms of new customer acquisition? Does it feed into our longer term strategy of either building sales or building profitability? Because obviously those two strategies will have very different components and how we manifest themselves into our marketing strategy.
And I guess the other thing also is that the reality is a lot of these brands, they're so focused on designing products, manufacturing products, importing products, retailing products, running promotions, etc., that oftentimes they don't necessarily appreciate when they run massive discounts like Black Friday, Cyber Monday, when they're running all these different concurrent promotions. So they might be running a catalog-based promotion. They might be running a shopping cart price value-based promotion. They can be running multiple different promotions across brand, category, cart. They can be running so many different things simultaneously that it's actually hard, even if they want to, outside of software like yours, it is almost impossible to see the net impact of those types of campaigns and promotions on their bottom line. It is really hard to see. And I guess that's the key here, is that because you're pulling in transactional data. So let's say somebody's running a shopping cart price promotion, and let's say they qualify, and we don't know exactly how the final discount line on that order, we don't necessarily know exactly how that's allocated across the cart, because even a platform like Shopify or Big or anything else, there's a little bit of obfuscation in there when they qualify for a cart level promotion. Either they've hit a certain total, or they've got the right combination of products from a category or something in it that then boom, that unlocks a promotion, or they put in a coupon code or something like that. So how do you deal with those really complex composite carts and composite discounts and then allocate them to the right SKUs? Or do you simply do a pro rata allocation if it's not clear what it is and it just gets prorated against the cart?
It's prorated against the cart. We're not doing anything to really get that deep. It's more on the order level and aggregating against aggregated data there on the SKU levels. We're not getting overly deep to really, as you said, obfuscate that into a cart level back to the SKU. Exactly. It's done more on aggregated on an order level.
And that makes sense, right? At the end of the day, that view is better than no view. And that's the key here, right? Is that most merchants, they don't actually have a view on the only time that they can start to work out at all what the impact of discounting is, maybe at the end of the month when they run their monthly reports. And then maybe they can go, okay, cool. We gave away X number of dollars in total discounting for the month. We have to take into account, for example, things like returns and take that off the bottom line. And then once we take in all the revenue, we subtract out all the costs, then we start to have a picture of the impact of discounting in arrears. Whereas I guess you can give them near real-time visibility into these impacts, which allows them to make faster, more accurate decisions on the fly in their business, right? As opposed to doing it monthly, quarterly, or like annually.
Absolutely. Yeah. And once you get down to the order level profitability, you can see if there has been a discount used on that order and what that discount entails. If you have said a 20% off discount site-wide, you might go into Shopify and see that's being used, I don't know, 1,000 times. When you drill into the order level profitability, you can actually see that, okay, it's being used 99 times on orders where we didn't even have 20% margin to begin with. And therefore, we've been driving traffic to a campaign, traffic to products, and we've generated these orders that are actually losing us money on the aggregate, which is not a good solution for a lot of businesses to be in at all. So it's really interesting. There's a lot of brands that we're seeing that they're often driven on revenue oriented metrics, sales, average order value, often even customer lifetime value. And the need to orientate themselves towards revenue driven metrics often gives marketers a license to give out discounts willy-nilly. And therefore we're driving up the revenue, but it's coming at the cost of margin. Okay, we might have a target CPA we want to hit on an order. That's again our revenue oriented metric we need to hit. We need to achieve this purchase for €40, but we're going to give a 20% off discount. And therefore you've got your CPA, but you've also eroded your margin by whatever it is, 20%. And therefore the margin you might have thought you might have had at the start has been completely eroded by the discount. And therefore it's eye-opening for a lot of brands to really plug in the system and see how much discounts they're giving away. A lot of brands are giving out more discounts than they're taking home in contribution margin or net profit, which is very eye-opening. Therefore, again, you could be attracting the wrong types of customers. And again, you start training your customers on only really willing to shop when there is a discount, which again causes a whole host of problems.
And how do you think about some of the more complex cost structures to businesses? So for example, loyalty, which is a liability against the business, and you'll have certain average redemption rates of loyalty, but as long as you've got loyalty outstanding, it is a liability on the business and it is a cost to the business. And then of course you've got reverse logistics, which are another cost input to the business. And those really, especially from a reverse logistics perspective, need to be allocated back ideally to the original against the original orders because it affects the profitability of that original order. So do you take into account things like loyalty credits and reverse logistics? And because there's some of these costs that are really esoteric and they're hard to decouple from the rest of the business. And for example, there's customer service costs, which you could get, say, for example, out of Gorgeous in terms of, okay, we had certain number of contacts on average per order, but when someone contacts us through live chat, that's a very different cost structure versus email versus a very different cost structure versus a telephone call. So how do you start dealing with some of these really complex and fine-grained variable costs? Or do you look at them in aggregate instead and really just prorata them against all orders?
Yeah, no, really good question. So on the loyalty piece, it's only really taking into account the discount when the customer comes back as opposed to holding the liability on a balance sheet within StoreHero effectively. So it's aggregated to an effect, but it does take it into account once the customer uses those redemption points on a return order, on a repeat order, I should say. In terms of the return cost, obviously a massive issue with a lot of brands today. Some brands we're working with have up to a 40% returns rate. So obviously when we're looking at a business that takes into account margins, we needed to make sure that was really taken into account properly. So you can input what your return costs will be and hook that in again with Zapier to make sure those true return costs are mapped directly back into the order level and back to your return cost that goes into the real-time P&L dashboard within StoreHero. Obviously, that was very much a massive component that we needed to get right. So yeah, that's fully taken into account in the platform as well.
Very nice. And how do you guys look at yourself through the lens of, if I log into the Shopify App Store today, I'll probably see 20 analytics platforms in there, sales analytics platforms. There's Clar, and there's just, it feels like a new one pops up in the App Store seemingly every month. So this feels, especially post-COVID, this feels like a challenge that a lot of merchants are finally starting to recognize. Oh my God, we haven't been doing this right. We have not been tracking this right. We don't have a really clear picture of the financial performance of our business until our accountant does our final year-end tax preparation. We have no idea how we're performing as a business apart from looking in our account and making sure we've got money in our account every month. They realize that, and that's definitely coming onto merchants' radar. And I think that's created the huge opportunity that you recognized, which is why you built your platform in the first place. But how do you see you guys differentiating yourself against other competitors? How do you see you guys standing out in a market that's getting noisier and more crowded with time? How do you guys see yourself as being that unique voice in the wilderness for merchants?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. Look, I suppose we initially started the platform as more of a tool to really aggregate all of your marketing data. So it's very marketing orientated. We've got some great UI in there in terms of aggregating all of the core marketing components, not just your paid marketing channels, but also your Google Search Console, your Google Analytics. We've built a nice creative overview dashboard in there as well. Some of the feedback, we've probably interviewed 300 different e-com DTC operators before we even set foot about building StoreHero. So we had spoken to a lot of business owners who had used similar tools in the past. Onboarding was definitely another piece that a lot of them struggled with, that it was very difficult to actually get set up and running initially. The platform is only going to be as good as the data that you decide to enter into it. So we've made a really concerted effort to make sure that the input of the data initially was going to be done with one of our customer success reps on the call, or myself or Carl, just to make sure that all of that data was set up correctly. And then we also offer a strong kind of customer success element with the platform, so that we basically want merchants to get as much value from the platform that we know is there. And again, I suppose the third component, and I suppose how we're differentiating ourselves, is from a really clear view to improving the UI and UX of the platform, which we've made a really good effort to make as clear and simple to use as possible. And I think we've done a great job on that today. I would say that, but even from hearing from our existing customers, they really like the look and feel of the platform. And they feel that, like a lot of, I suppose our biggest competitor, even on this topic, it's not any of the other tools out there, it's still the spreadsheet. And I'd say most of our competitors would tell you the same thing. A lot of DTC operators are still doing all of this manually on a spreadsheet. And to get them into a frame of mind whereby they don't need to log in the morning and actually spend 20 minutes, half an hour aggregating all of this stuff. They can log in, the platform is there, and they can actually start making more profitable decision making. One other component I suppose we've done really is the ability to set up your inbox every morning, your email. So you can customize not just the P&L you'll get every morning, but also any of the custom metrics. So again, we were started as a marketing platform. It's definitely evolved into more of a unit economics margin and profitability component. So for instance, on your morning email, you'll get your P&L, but you can also decide the types of metrics that you want to get. So for instance, what are some of the more common ones? Your marketing efficiency ratio, your break-even marketing efficiency ratio, Facebook ROAS, Google ROAS, but things like staff cost as a percentage of net sales, OPEX as a percentage of net sales. So there's a lot outside of the Facebook and Google ads or even the Shopify platform that definitely has a hell of a lot to do with the profitability of your business. So we're trying to take a fully holistic approach to understand, can you make better hiring decisions around your business to really impact that bottom line at the end of the day? So we've made a really concerted effort to get that in place too.
Love it. And how, this is going to be a bit of a loaded question, but how has your business had to adjust? Or maybe, I guess the better question is, has this put a rocket ship under your platform, the introduction of GA4? Now, there has been a lot of talk in the industry about just how bad GA4 is in many respects for merchants and how it is obfuscating formerly really transparent or more transparent clickstream data. Now, I know you don't pitch yourself as a clickstream data analytics platform. I wouldn't ever say that's what you are, because that's not what you try to be. And you don't, it's not like you've got a tracking pixel on the website or anything like that. But it seems that Google is going down a path where they really want merchants to just trust them, shut up, and buy more ads. That's how it feels. And that's how, with GA4 and GTM being absolutely fairly and squarely developer focused platforms now, they're not really for beginners. They're difficult to implement. It's difficult to create custom reports. It's difficult to get accurate clickstream data tracking. So not only, I think, has GA4 created an opportunity for other third-party analytics platforms, but I feel like it's also created a massive opportunity for technology like yours, because where merchants used to rely on Google Analytics for a lot of, say, some of the data components that you present to them and visualize for them, they can't even rely on Google Analytics for that anymore. So it feels like Google Analytics has shot themselves in the foot, perhaps intentionally, to try to just get you to spend more with ads and just trust their data. It feels like that's opened a massive window for you guys too.
Yeah, so we saw it initially as this is going to be really difficult for merchants, but I think as time went on, we realized a lot of merchants were struggled with it, and we saw an opportunity with it. So the Shopify migration to GA4 has meant that the data comes structured into GA4 in a certain way that we've been able to probably capitalize on, that we've built a really simple UI, I suppose, to pull out all of those core Google Analytics components a lot of e-commerce operators were looking at before, and again, bring them into StoreHero for you to analyze. But also we've created a nice visualization purchase funnel, so you can see all of your sessions into product page views all the way down to the transactional level. And again, view that on a source level as well to really start monitoring any anomalies between the traffic source at various components of the overarching funnel. And again, being able to see your product page views, your products on a transactional level, product page views versus add to cart rate versus revenue driven from purchases. Again, all as reported within GA4, so it's never going to be 100% accurate. But again, we're giving merchants what post GA4 migration was a daunting task for a lot of merchants, logging in and trying to learn a new UI and new interface. We've pulled that into StoreHero into a relatively familiar view in which they're used to seeing before. So it has been good for us in that merchants who have been overwhelmed by the complexity of GA4 can log in, still use GA4, but in a UI that they're used to.
And making those reports and that data much more actionable, because you're backing it with much more data than would normally flow into GA4 anyway, because you're pulling in data from multiple sources plus transactional data in ways that GA4 just doesn't do. And so it feels like this is a much more complete picture for merchants. And when you think about what your customers are asking for today that you don't do, or when you look out over the next 12 months, what is your priority to enhance and extend the platform to give merchants even better visibility than they have today? What's like priority 1, 2, and 3 for you guys?
Yeah, one component, I suppose, is the accounting software integration. It's the closed loop that we don't have yet. We have our API set up in a way that we will be integrating it probably early on next year. That's going to be a really big one for us. So really just hooking in with Xero and QuickBooks. Again, we have it largely built in the background at the moment, but we just want to make sure that it's particularly in your world, Jason, you're very B2B focused, but if a business is operating both D2C, retail and B2B, there's certain components of Xero and QuickBooks that they won't want to import into their D2C profitability landscape. So we just want to make sure that once we have it set up, that it's apportioned correctly and that we're not overstepping the mark and reporting badly on any brand's profitability. So definitely the accounting piece is one. We're just about to launch a much more comprehensive customer lifetime value component to really, I suppose we didn't launch it initially because we wanted to make sure all of the costing data was in correctly. And again, looking back at this problem with revenue oriented metrics in the industry, I think customer lifetime value is arguably one of the most arbitrary metrics that people tend to find out there today, whereby if you're looking at your customer lifetime value in terms of revenue lifetime value, it's going to be very different versus that value component actually looks like. So we wanted to make sure that before we launched a true customer lifetime value piece, that we had all of those variable costs inputted correctly, and that when we do get to a report on a customer lifetime value metric, that it's and thirdly, the elephant in the room when we talk about e-commerce is the Amazon integration, which again will be coming in Q1 of next year. We've just started getting to work on that, but that'll be really exciting. And obviously, a lot of e-commerce businesses are operating multi-channel and have Amazon as part of that stack as well. So really looking forward to getting to work on that too.
Love it. And I agree with you. CLV is one of the hardest to calculate. And there are
Yeah.
about 10 different ways you can actually arrive at that value, both from a perspective of when do you consider a customer churned, therefore, how do you calculate what is the lifetime of a customer, and therefore, what is the value that they bring over that time? What is the profitability that they bring over that time? There's so many components. And if you're not bringing into cost to serve at the customer level, that you don't actually know what the customer lifetime value is. So yeah, it's a really murky one. But I guess the idea here is that what we want to be looking at as a merchant is the trend of customer lifetime value more so than the absolute figures, right? So if you're using the same measurement methodology for CLV across a window of time, then at least you can see the trend. And I think that's probably more important than absolute figures. And that's true of almost every metric, is we need to be looking at trends more so than the absolute specifics. And if the trends are going in the right direction, then we're probably improving our business over time, which is the most important piece. And for you guys, your typical SaaS platform, you've got this tiered model of pricing. So you've got the starter pack, $129 a month, all the way up to effectively an enterprise plan and kind of the plus and pro plan. In between, it's based on revenue levels. So a starter level, less than 500K annual revenue, then the plus tier, 500K to 2 million annual, then 2 to 5 million annual. So it feels like you've tried to, this pricing seems ridiculously cheap based on the value that you're bringing to a business. And I guess the transparency and the financial literacy, that's the actual umbrella I'd put it under. I would put this under financial literacy. Yes, it's a visualization tool, and yes, it's an analytics tool, but it's almost a financial literacy tool, because there are a lot of merchants that until they get to be a fairly big brand, they usually can't afford a CFO level employee. And so therefore, they're doing it all themselves as a brand owner. And so they're trying to understand these metrics better, but it feels like you're trying to democratize this level of financial literacy for e-commerce brands.
100%. And a lot of our investors are fractional CFOs of e-commerce brands and groups. And this is a tool that they can use to almost do a hell of a lot more work. We're definitely not a replacement for a CFO. We never purport to be, but it is a tool that can give a lot of the financial learnings that a CFO would give to a lower level brand out of the box. And that's a really big unlock for brands. Again, going back to that brands chasing a higher ROAS piece, if you can start to understand your contribution margin spend, if your spend goes up and your contribution margin goes up, keep spending, even though your rest of your MER actually might go down. That's a big mindset shift for a lot of brands, because they've typically been trapped in this way of thinking where they think we just need to keep making sure the ROAS goes up. But unless you have a fundamental understanding of what that unit economic cost structure actually looks like, wanting to achieve a certain ROAS without really having much rationale or financial as to how you got to that figure, it could be costing your business a hell of a lot of money. And again, it goes back to that point whereby a lot of businesses are overspending on their ads, but I actually see a bigger problem with more businesses fundamentally underspend. And again, it comes back to just not having a clear picture of what the core unit economics actually look like, which is exciting for a lot of brands when we plug it in. Obviously, we get the opposite quite a bit as well, where there's a lot of problems to solve, but more often than not, there's more opportunities than problems, which is fantastic.
And how would you prefer that people get a hold of you? I'll put the links to StoreHero in the show notes. So it's storehero.ai for anybody that wants to learn a bit more about the platform. But do you like people reaching out to you on LinkedIn, or just go to the StoreHero website and get a hold of you guys and maybe get a demo and talk to you guys that way?
Yeah, either or. You can jump onto the website there. You can book a call with myself or Karen, or you can contact me directly on my LinkedIn at Thomas Gleeson at StoreHero.
Wow, absolutely amazing. Now we're coming to the end of our time together, and I really appreciate the chat we had today. It was super fun, super enlightening, and it's always cool to have a conversation with somebody that's really familiar with the podcast, because I feel like they just roll with it because they know how I do things here. But we're now at the point where I get to flip the script, hand the microphone over to you, let you ask me one question, any question you like, personal or professional. Thomas Gleeson from StoreHero, what is your question for me today?
What is one thing you know now that you would have thought would have been ridiculous 10 years ago in this game?
Wow, such a great question. I've never been asked that one before.
I tried to be original.
That is amazing. That is really good. You knew this question was coming, didn't you? Look, I think this is gonna sound maybe a little bit canned, but honestly, because I worked with D2C brands long before I ever got into the B2B space. And I've really only been specializing in B2B since I started my consultancy. So I spent many years working directly with a lot of D2C brands, and D2C space is cool. It's fun. It's dynamic. It's sexy. It's hot. lots of cool brands, lots of household names there. But I think what I didn't fully appreciate is that even the sexiest D2C brands, the Allbirds of the world, the 8 Sleeps, etc., I didn't realize just how limiting that D2C, because I always espoused the D2C model as where the whole entire future of commerce was going. I truly, if you'd asked me this 5 or 6 years ago, I would have said eventually new retail means that every brand will be D2C in the future. And that that B2B for in large part is going to die. It's going to go away. It's going to disappear because every manufacturer and every wholesaler and every distributor is now going to be D2C. And so therefore there will be no need of any kind of middleman or any kind of wholesaler standing between a manufacturer and their customer. I couldn't have been more wrong. I see now, especially post-COVID, that a lot of these D2C darlings that have never been profitable, we look at these brands and we put them up on a pedestal because they got $500 million of investment or $1 billion worth of investment because of their growth rates. And now we're seeing that many of them are being forced to go into at least a partial wholesale model to get distribution, to bring their CAC costs down, to get economies of scale, and to also be in front of customers that they could never get in front of. Because there are certain customers that will buy off of certain retailers or suppliers or Amazon or whatever. There are certain customers that will buy off of those channels, and you will never have a chance to sell to them, no matter how much money you spend on ads or no matter how well you execute digitally. You will never be found by those customers because that's not where they buy. And so what I have discovered and what I've had to eat a fair bit of crow over this is that I think D2C absolutely has its place in the world, but do I think that it will forever be the way that all retailers go? No, I don't. I think that B2B is an essential part of the D2C channel mix for manufacturers, wholesalers, and distributors. They have to be B2B to de-risk their future because D2C is just so costly from an acquisition perspective. And from a distribution and economies of scale perspective, it's so hard to reach that escape velocity point all through your own channels. Even if you've got a digital channel and a physical retail store channel, it is still so difficult to reach escape velocity without at scale distribution through wholesale. And I wouldn't have said that 5 years ago. I really wouldn't have. And it's taught me a really harsh lesson. COVID taught me a really harsh lesson, and it taught a lot of merchants harsh lessons. And I'm getting more D2C brands coming to me today, post-COVID, saying, Jace, we know we have to open a wholesale channel, but we have no idea how to do that. We need to de-risk our business, and we need to reach this escape velocity faster. And we know the only way to do that is at wholesale, but we've only ever done D2C. We don't even know where to begin. So I'm having more of these conversations on a daily basis, and man, has it taught me a big lesson in the process.
Really good answer. That's such interesting insight because obviously that's an area that you're incredibly familiar with. But it's mad to even think that, yeah, probably even 5 years ago, the answer would have still stood, and that 5-6 years ago, you would probably have had the exact same answer. We're seeing something similar with a lot of brands where they're trying to expand internationally and the CAC is just way too high, and that they go in with B2B, they get the name out there, and suddenly the CAC actually starts to drop, even though they are actually still making money on the B2B sales as well. And they're using the B2B expansion as a mechanism to actually drive internationalization through the D2C channel as well. Really interesting point, and having multiple conversations like this with brands who are struggling at the moment, who haven't yet explored wholesale or haven't done it properly yet, because there's a difference. So yeah, it's a really interesting answer.
Absolutely love it. Listen, May, it's been a fabulous conversation. An hour has absolutely flown by. I appreciate all of your efforts in the space to come from the Shopify space, recognize a gap in the market, then run headlong at it. Look, I know how hard it is to create good software in our space. It's expensive, it's time consuming, it's risky. And look, I applaud people that are trying to help those merchants in the space be better, do better, and treat their customers better. Congratulations to you on getting this far in such a short period of time. And I can't wait to speak to you again in another year or so and see where you've got to in the intervening year. Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.